In the competitive world of medical school, your application is the first look advisors have into what makes you shine. But where do you start? Luckily, Med School Coach has the expertise to elevate your application to the next level. From crafting a compelling personal statement to developing a narrative for your secondary essays, we know what admissions committees are looking for, and we're here to help you develop your authentic voice. Visit medschoolcoach.com for more on application support.
I also do on-call advising. So when those periods of time during the summer where you can't get in touch with your pre-med advisor or your pre-health advisor, and you're just sort of going nuts that you want some immediate feedback, we do have a service for that. And I generally am the one that communicates with people about it.
Welcome to the Prospective Doctor podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Join us weekly for stories and insights to empower pre-med and medical students to pursue their aspirations of becoming doctors. Hear from physicians, deans, advisors, and industry experts on becoming a standout candidate and what life is truly like in the medical field. Let passion ignite your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
You're likely listening to the Prospective Doctor because you need some form of support with navigating this crazy journey into medicine. At the intersection of healthcare education and student support stands Dr. Chuck. He's the Director of Advising Services at Health Professional Student Association, also known as HPSA. He serves as an invaluable source, helping people navigate this journey through the admissions process and even navigating med school. His insights on this episode include the evolution of medical school admissions and the importance of intentionality when we create our career choices. This definitely resonated with me so deeply because it's conversations like this that help us talk about what our actual why is. I hope that it resonates with you too. Here's my conversation with Dr. Chuck.
You have such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from all of the spectrums of healthcare and science. I love it. We have students who, number one, are considering their pre-med, so they don't know where they want to go in healthcare, if they want to go in medicine, if they want to do dental, if they want to do research. So there are opportunities, and you have some insights on all of that. And then on top of that, dear and true to my heart, I was a cellular biology major in undergrad. So we're kindred spirits. And then Student Doctor Network, right now, most of the listeners don't realize it because we're in a digital age, but you guys are the OGs. That's the only resource that I had when I was trying to figure out how to navigate getting into med school. And now we have things like these podcasts and different forums and all of these different things, advisors like Med School Coach. So I just want us to dive into all of the things.
No problem. No, I appreciate it. And again, we are the OGs about that. But on the other hand, I think over the years, we've really tried to keep ourselves very true to being an expert-driven, volunteer-driven community. In general, we really strive to be a very supportive online community, and with many, many people who represent different aspects of medical education or health professions education. It winds up being one of the few places where where we have provided a lot of expertise. A lot of our students, especially if you're interested in veterinary medicine, physical therapy, podiatry, a lot of those other programs that don't get as much attention and they don't have the same sort of support with regards to other admissions consultants. We still have a lot of that support where we are located on the forums, and we strive to get more and more people to contribute articles to our regular article archive. And actually, that's where a lot of my more recent advising has really landed, is really there on the article archive. So I definitely encourage people to go ahead and read it. It's meant to be very timely in certain cases and hopefully last a couple of years. So I've written an article, for example, on at that time, the newer age of virtual interviewing and what to expect. We've done a lot with at least, telling people, what is it really like behind the scenes when it comes to looking at applications, screening them, what really is happening behind the scenes about that. While you're waiting is probably one of those articles that I think people really, I come from the admission side. There's a lot that goes on. We really don't mean to ghost you or keep you hanging. It's just some things we're not the only, that's not the only thing that we wind up doing. And then most recently, I published an article about, how wait lists generally tend to be managed, at least in general. I can't spill secrets, but I can give people sort of a general idea of things to think about philosophically. And so we're with you. A lot of us root for you when you're on the alternate list, no matter wherever you're ranked. So don't think that we just do this to spite you or to be mean or anything else like that. We really, if you're on our wait list, we hope that it moves as fast and we can get to you as you possibly can too, once you get to that point.
I love that. And it seems like there are like so many articles that the students are craving. So we've had some episodes on some of those things, and it sounds like you're going to have to be invited back as like our like expert specialist on these things, because each of those articles, I was trying to say like, ooh, I want us to talk about that, and I want us to talk about that. So we'll have to dedicate some more episodes to that. But I definitely
read them. They're published. They're online. So there's no paywall. Please feel free to read them all. So
yes, I definitely think that we will try to maybe pin some of them in the episode show notes for you guys to look at. But there's so much, like you said, behind the scenes. And it's great that we have these resources where we can kind of help you navigate through it, because sometimes it can be a little confusing and you don't know what you don't know. And it's such a stressful time.
No, absolutely. No. And again, it's really challenging. And how I think a lot of people, even 20 some odd years ago, I think how we really would think about admissions and what information we have then, it's so different now. It's still evolving, as any process is going to still evolve. And so sometimes it's a little bit hard to kind of catch what's actually going on, and then having people tell us, well, how does this impact the application process? I'm like, well, I wish I could tell you for sure, but no one knows yet. We're trying to get all that research in. And so a lot of my research background comes into play and is very useful along those lines too. So a lot of the advice that I give, and I've given to other people, I know what the usual bread and butter advice that everyone will get by consensus. And I guess in the current era of, generative AI summarizing everybody's whatever everyone thinks and is put on the internet, I think what I try to do a little bit more is really try to be a little bit more provocative, a little bit more out of the box when it comes to having people really think about things, because it's like, you need to know why you're doing something. And you need to know it's not just you want to just keep up with everybody, or it's just a plug and play of all your GPA and so forth. I mean, there's a certain level where I don't think we can all avoid the fact that, metrics do matter. But on the other hand, how does everything else play into effect? We're not basically choosing you because you fit, a certain set of numbers. We're not like picking screws from a drawer or something like that to build something. So you're more than just a set of screws or nails or whatever else like that. And we just like to make sure people know that.
I love that. And like you said, one of the things that stood out is, and we talk about this often, is like knowing your why, because that can mean a lot of different things, and it can help you propel forward and do well on interviews, as well as even when you're actually on the other side in the process, kind of reflect back and just figure out what your trajectory is, or why you're even there, or if you even really want to do this, because it's a long road, and you may sit down and you're like, okay, I want to help people. And a lot of people use that generic topic of conversation, but there's so many different ways to help people. So figuring out what way is for you and if it's actually right for you is important.
And doing a good deep dive into various healthcare careers is really important. If we're going to just restrict ourselves to healthcare careers, there's hundreds of them. And so a lot of times people are very, very hardcore. Like, I want to go into this particular specialty. I want to go into this particular surgical area. And a lot of times I'm impressed, but I really try to, again, I have an interprofessional sort of mindset. So I really try to expand that a little bit to say, you could still kind of do some of those things as a physician assistant. You could do that if you're thinking about orthopedics. You can get a lot more patient interaction if you were, say, a physical therapist. And so trying to give people a better idea about sort of all of the different team members that you as a doctor really rely on to make sure the patient gets better. In the end, I think you're overseeing a lot of different sort of healthcare plans, hopefully written collaboratively. But is your role to really sort of monitor how people are doing, or do you really want to be upfront and, on the day-to-day front lines, really helping people as they are hopefully getting better, or they're struggling, just to stay afloat or, stay on par. And I will agree, it's easy to say you like to help people. I hope everyone likes to help people. I think that should be, you don't need to be a doctor to be someone to help people. But I think part of it is really understanding who you are, getting yourself into sort of an insight into what you want your future to look like. And so I'm sure in your group and so many other groups, and I will love to tell people this too, among the many pieces I will tell people is, you're only as good as the crowd you're with. And a lot of times the crowd that you're with also involves the professionals who are mentoring you, who will champion you, who will give you not just letters of recommendation, but will give you more than just letters of recommendation. They want to actually see you succeed. Again, I come from the dental world too, on the admission side of things. And there's so many dentists that are like, they'll write in their letters, I'm really looking forward to this person who's been my dental assistant to eventually take over my practice. And you want somebody like that. And I think, unfortunately, on the pre-med side, because the way, medicine is really set up, you don't have that type of a true champion the same way that so many of the other health professions do, like dentists and veterinarians and optometrists and so forth, where they really want you to be with them, that they can train you side by side after you've gotten your education. In some future, if that actually is allowed, maybe that will happen in medicine too. But it certainly, I come from that fact of, that's the standard I've had in my head. And again, I'm provocative on that. I know not many doctors will have that type of control. So be aware that the people that you're with, the people that are giving you support, even to appropriately, constructively critique you, whether they be your peers, whether they be your mentors, that all is part of how you become who you are, how you see yourself, because you're around people who are doing things that you want to do, or things that you think you could do and hopefully improve on what they're doing in some future where the technology really allows for it or something like that. So I think people really think that of the now, that I need to do it now. And again, so much of your preparation to get into a long-term career like medicine really requires so much more help from more people than you really think that it's you. So that's one of the big pluses that I will tell people online when people ask, what do you think are my chances? And among the things that I'll ask is like, who's read your personal statement? How have you gone networking in terms of a mentoring organization? Have you gone to Student National Medical Association online, or, gone to recruitment events and met chapter presidents or chapter officers that are really looking for people like you? And it's surprising that we don't really have a lot of that still. So it's among the things I really try to tell people, do that and really give yourself a better, sharper focus on how you expect to help people. I mean, we want to train people who want to help people, but are we the right place for you or for it? That becomes a little bit more of an interesting question.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Are you ready to conquer the MCAT and secure your future in medicine? Look no further than Med School Coach. With our unparalleled expertise and cutting-edge resources, you'll tackle the MCAT with confidence. Our practice exams, crafted by the world's leading MCAT experts, provide the most realistic simulation available. Discover your strengths and weaknesses with in-depth analytics and detailed explanations for every question. Plus, with options like our free half-length exam and affordable bundles, mastering the MCAT has never been easier or more accessible. Don't just prepare for the MCAT. Excel with Med School Coach.
Just want to reiterate your community comment in having this what I like to call kind of like your personal board of directors. So like everybody isn't doing everything and everyone doesn't have the same skill set. There may be mentors in medicine or attending physicians you've gotten to know over time through volunteer, or that you just know, or your family members that may know you from a different light, or your other organizations and things that you've been involved in, but all of them are kind of rooting for you and trying to push you forward and propel you for success and advising you. So it's very important to have that, but also be looking to grow that. So you can't just stay in your bubble of people that you know at your institution and stuff like that. Like, go to these conferences and network, because a lot of times you may learn something either through their journey and their process, because people love talking about themselves, or even through like maybe having a new idea of something you had never even heard of, or even a specialty you'd never heard of. If you saying like you want to do orthopedics, like you said, or something like that, you may have never even heard of physiatry, which does it in a different way, or sports medicine through family medicine. So just talking to different people, you can see how you can kind of make your journey your own.
Right. And obviously that's one of the real great resources that the original forums and the forums in general have. So you have the opportunity to speak with people who have been there long enough that they all will talk to each other, even within their specialties. They're fully practiced professionals, and you may not necessarily want to jump in and dive into a conversation, but you can at least read a little bit about what some of their concerns really are about the future of their particular profession, or some of the interesting changes that may affect the way that they can practice regarding state regulations, or it could be insurance payments and reimbursements, or other sort of issues. So, I mean, again, it's a place where you can go to and kind of get a sense of what the pulse of a specific specialty or a group of specialties is all about. And I know, I don't know whether, as I said, that, any of the students that you have that are joining you on this podcast realize that those resources have been there. We have over 20 years plus of all of those types of conversations. And not that you necessarily want to go all the way back to 2008, but you can really get some insight into where things are kind of headed, whether it's emergency medicine or LGBTQ medicine, healthcare, those sorts of things. You can kind of get a sense and an idea about where everybody's concerns really are.
I love that. People should definitely check it out, because you've already shared a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure there's so much more. And then there's also the input from everyone else. One thing I would say in terms of HPSA is that you guys recently launched 2023 Situational Judgment Test, experience survey, where you were able to observe the differences in applications who are selected for early interviews among those programs that requested that. Can you tell us a little bit about that and a key takeaway?
So hopefully most of you who are online and are listening to situational judgment tests, what that involves, this is not a completely brand new experience. If you're interested, we have plenty of articles online that really go into that. And admittedly, this is a little bit more of a pioneering world where people are really trying to grapple with what these extra so-called tests are. What are situational judgment tests? We, in addition to obviously having our survey, we also do run a situational judgment test workshop just to kind of get people really in the mood of what these tests really are looking at. It's not like your MCAT. It's not like a DAT. It's not a knowledge-based test, but you do want to get a sense of what you're being tested on and how the two major players are evaluating those competencies and those processes. So there's two big players. One of them is called Casper, which is run by a company called Acuity Insights. It's one of a couple of different assessments that they do, but the situational judgment test one is called Casper. They also have a values-based test called Duet, and that's something I'll set aside because that's not really what we test on here. But Casper is basically an open-ended computer-based test that you take online, and it basically allows you to process situations and respond to a certain number of questions related to each situation. And I think it's like 14 different situations. I don't run the test. I just know how people have used them before. Some of the questions are audiovisual questions, so you can reply through your webcam and your microphone. Some of them are typing based, so it requires you to actually type in a response within a certain period of time. So this is a test that's been around for at least a decade. It's sort of shaped on many different structured interview exams, similar to the multi-mini interview. It's kind of the online version of a multi-mini interview, which is in its own right a version of the objective structured clinical exam, which is typically the gold standard that we have to evaluate health professionals, not just regarding how they use their medical information, but also how they interact with patients. So it's all along the same lines, are all related to each other. And so that's one of the tests. The other test is the AAMC's own situational judgment test that they developed for about a decade, called the preview exam, professional readiness exam, preview exam, whatever they call it. And it's a multiple choice test based on situations that are crafted in a way that they're standardized and basically come from the input of various medical educators in student affairs and admissions and diversity and inclusion, that they actually come up with these very, I guess, sterile, if you will, but standardized situations where they basically ask you, would you do this? Would this be an effective response to this situation or not? You have this test for about, I think it's also about a 75-minute to 90-minute test. And you go through about 140, roughly about 140 of these types of questions. So they're two different tests. They're in two different formats, but they're supposed to measure you on very similar competencies. And so what we know is they're both different tests, and they both will not necessarily give you the same results. And that's the sort of conundrum that everyone wants to know, is like, what if, do I have to take this exam? Do I have to take both exams? How much more effort is involved in this? Does it really matter in admissions decisions and so forth? So this survey, which we've run like a pilot version of it in 22, when AAMC decided they would do full implementation of Preview last year, we launched a little bit larger survey, and those are the results that we're sort of rolling out very slowly to give people a little bit of insight into, how students have been preparing for the test, what resources they've been using, which for the most part, there is not much on the resource side for Preview, but there is definitely a lot more on Casper because it's been around longer. And the more interesting findings or set of findings that we're rolling out a little bit is trying to get a sense of the behavior of how schools are using Preview and Casper, at least if you look at it on the outside. So we're not looking at it from a standpoint of an admissions committee and how we use Casper or we use Preview to make selections. We're looking at the aggregate. We're looking at how all the programs that are using Casper and Preview, from how best that we can tell from our respondents, how is that affecting the way that people get selected for at least very early interviews? And so those are some of the results that we're going to be rolling out a little bit. I think a lot of people are still kind of very hesitant on how to use these tests. It's very interesting because typically situational judgment tests in a normal sort of employment world, you use them to actually filter down from a very, very large applicant pool that you first get from responding to a job description, to a smaller set of people that you want to shortlist later on and maybe go through first round of interviews. So a situational judgment test allows an employer to really get a sense of how well you know about company values, company professionalism, and sort of those behaviors that we would anticipate you would be familiar with if you got that particular job. The way that both AAMC and the Acuity Insights teams are talking about these SJTs is we don't want you to use them as first line filters in the same way that you probably would for like threshold scores for MCATs or whatever else. They want people to say, well, it's an opportunity for you to identify other individuals who may not have higher metrics, but they do well in professionalism type, in this professionalism type exam. So it's still very nebulous about how schools are really using this exam. So one of the nice answers that we can tell people, and we have data that we're rolling out ultimately about it, is to say that not everybody has come to a real consensus that if you got a low score on any of these SJTs, that you're completely eliminated from contention. We don't know that yet. And that's not something that our survey was able to capture because we only wanted to know who got early interviews. Turns out that there are still plenty of people with low scores that got interviews, in September, October, November. So what does that actually mean? It's going to be very interesting as I think people get more and more used to knowing how these scores really help the application process, can really be used to predict, as it were, student behavior or professionalism issues or whatever else going down the line. And I think that's one of the selling points that the Acuity Insights folks have with other admissions professionals in using their exam. And I'm fairly certain AAMC, they published a couple of papers already about it. And they're just in the process of trying to collect much more data over the next 3 or so years to validate the same thing. So it's not a test that's going away anytime soon. You do need to know the nuances about each of those tests, what they require technically. Casper, you have to take every application cycle. Preview, it sounds like so far you don't. So basically it's like if you play 21 at the casino and you hit 20, You don't retake the preview exam if you got an 8 or a 7, 8, or 9. Don't retake it again. AAMC's position is you can hold on to that score as long as it's valid. And the schools decide how long it's valid, and none of the schools have told us how long that is. So who knows exactly? So this is one of those worlds that I wish we all had answers to, but the people who have to make the answers have not, haven't told anybody yet. So this is where we are on that. So when we roll out with more information about it, please, check us out on the HPSA website on SDN. We've already written a couple of preliminary insight articles about preparing for preview, as well as sort of some of the insights that we've seen about things that you can do before preparing for the exam that will prepare you for the exam, which, it makes some sense if you wind up reading the article and say, oh, these life experiences can help me with all of these situational judgment tests. And then it's like, of course, it makes sense. But to finally get it documented is a very nice thing to finally have. So we're very excited about what we do have and what we're able to share. But that's at least something I can tell everybody is like, please don't panic yet. If you got a first quartile or whatever score, don't think your application is completely shot. We don't have evidence of that just yet.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Unfortunately, we are coming to the close of our episode, but like I said, hopefully you'll come back and share more words of wisdom with us. I want to give you an opportunity to say goodbye to the audience, any last piece of advice for applicants and how they can find you and HPSA and all the things.
Sure. No problem. There's so much that we're doing with HPSA and that I've had involvement with. So anybody who is interested, and not to say that your services are less than capable, we do also provide a lot of resources and, get as much help as you kind of get. You leverage the expertise that we have at Student Doctor Network. I also have, I also do on-call advising. So when those periods of time during the summer where you can't get in touch with your pre-med advisor or pre-health advisor, and you're just sort of going nuts that you want some immediate feedback, we do have a service for that. And I generally am the one that communicates with people about it. We do also have a course, an online, basically a self-paced course to really try to help people who are applying to mostly medical school, but any health professional school, get an idea of what really are those future, big challenges coming up in the next 8 to 10 years of your career in medical education and training. And so we have this curated course that we do have available so that you get an idea of how the schools themselves are trying to help students address some of these big major picture issues. And hopefully this will be something that, complements any sort of advocacy, that interest that you have in becoming a physician or in becoming a community leader or whatever else, and try to get a better sense of how you can identify certain schools that really can appeal to developing that sense of who you are, who you want to be. So basically, I'm the holistic mission match component of trying to apply to medical school, which is complementary to, of course, the usual stats and the usual hours and the usual other things that everyone knows. You got to have that in order to be, quote, competitive or desirable as an applicant. So knowing all those other things hopefully help understand how you can at least present yourself in a way that can show that you really thoughtfully thought about what your future would be like if you were a student in that program. And that course is available. Anybody who is, eligible for a fee assistance program or has grown up in a medically underserved area can petition to get access to those materials for free. And so please contact us if that's something that you're interested in. We would love to help as many people as possible get to where they want to be as health professionals.
I love that. And thank you so much for all of your advice and words of wisdom. For all of the listeners out there, I think that this is an episode to share. So share this with all of your friends and colleagues and all of the things. And I'll see you again next week with another fantastic guest. Bye.
If you like this episode, please share it and make sure to subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also find me, Dr. Erkeda DeRouen, on Instagram at Dr. DGram, DOCTOR, the letter DGRAM, or on LinkedIn under my name, Erkeda DeRouen. See you guys next week.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.
Study for the MCAT anytime, anywhere, and boost your score. Get started with the MCAT Prep app by Med School Coach. Access hundreds of video tutorials, flashcards, and a robust question bank. With study scheduling and spaced repetition flashcards, mastering the MCAT has never been easier or more convenient. Join thousands of satisfied users who have elevated their MCAT game. Download the MCAT Prep app by Med School Coach from your favorite app store today.